Hi, this is Becky from Chic Molding, and I'm going to show you how to use Inkscape to create a digital file that you can use on your home cutter machine, or you can send them to a commercial cutter to be laser cut, CNC cut, or cut with a blade. Or as I say, you can use your home Cricut machine and it'll work with any of the tools on there. Firstly, let's figure out what kind of an image is going to be suitable to convert here. I've got two images on the screen here. They're both of the same butterfly, but I've added a few colours to one just to show you the difference. The top one here has nice clean lines. It's pretty easy to see the definition between the two colours. Here there's a lot of gradients going on. It's a bit ugly really, isn't it? But it's perfect for demonstrating. I've gone ahead and traced these already, so let's just move these over and show you the difference. This top one traced pretty nicely. That's it. There's a few little things to sort out, but that's all right. Not too much to do there. The bottom one, this is two different settings that I've done using the trace, and both of them are pretty naff. This one on the left is actually the better one. It's more workable than the right one. There's a heck of a lot of editing to do on that right one to make it anything near the trace result that we got from the simpler image. So another thing I want to talk about is the difference between a vector and a raster file. A raster you've probably heard of, files such as JPEGs or TIFFs. These are both raster files, and they are made up of lots and lots and lots of little docs that you've probably heard of called pixels. Let's just pop to Photoshop here and I'll just show you what happens when you zoom in on pixels. So the more I zoom in, the more fuzzy the edges get, and you can actually see the pixels. Here's one, here's one, here's one. All these little squares are pixels. So if we pop back to our Inkscape view here, if I zoom in on, let me just go to these. So here we go. Here we have a raster at the top and a vector at the bottom. The more you zoom in on the raster, the more blurry it gets. The more I zoom in on the vector, look at those lovely, clean, sharp edges. And the more I increase the size of these, let's have a look and show you. Now, you can probably see that one got fuzzier as it got bigger. This one still has lovely, clean edges. So vectors are much more scalable than rasters. They're also a much smaller file size. So how do these files work? They're actually made up of, as you can see here, each one of these dotted lines forms a square around a shape. Let me just select one of them for you so you can see what I mean. That's a shape on its own. And what they're actually made up of is lots of little nodes here, or points, depending on where you learnt about these things. And these nodes are controlled by handles and also settings. You can set them to be corners, or you can set them to be Bezier curves. We'll learn more about that later on. I've got a new document open here in Inkscape. I'll put a link down below to show you where you can download it for yourself. I'm going to open up the image that I want to trace to a vector, so I'll go to File, Open, and then find my image. You can download this image for yourself on the Chic Molding's website. I've written a blog to accompany this tutorial, so if it's going too fast for you at all, you can always go there and check out the written version. So here we've got a dialog box. I'm going to go ahead and click OK, and here's the butterfly. Before we start, let me introduce you to the Inkscape window here. We've got tools on the left hand side here. Click on them. If you click on them, you'll see this tool control bar here changing, and all of the gubbins here is related to the tool that you've clicked on. There's also menus up across the top here. I won't worry too much about the colours at the bottom and anything here on the right for the purpose of this tutorial. If you mouse over a tool, you'll see a little note come up which shows you the description of what the tool does, and also a letter. That letter is a keyboard shortcut, so for this select tool you can click on S, watch my cursor. If I click on R, which is the rectangle tool, my cursor changes to a rectangle. E is for the ellipse tool, changes to an ellipse, and so on. I'm going to click on the select tool and then click once on the image. You can see if an image is selected because it'll have this dotted box around it, and you'll also see these little arrows. I'll go more into these little arrows a bit later on. To trace this from this raster to a vector, I'm going to go to the Path menu and then go to Trace Bitmap, which opens up this tab over here. You can play with these options if you like, but to keep this simple, I'm just going to click Apply, and then I'm going to close down this tab. Now it doesn't look like an awful lot has happened, does it? But I know that the raster is behind the vector here, so I just need to get rid of the raster. If I click between this dotted line and the edge of the butterfly and then drag, you can see that the raster image has now been separated, and I can delete that by hitting delete on my keyboard, or I can right click and go to delete. Let's save this file before we go any further. We go to File, Save As, and just save it as you would any other type of file. We want to save it as an SVG. I'm going to call it butterfly stencil .svg and then save. I like to work on an image with outlines rather than fills, so I'm going to show you how I change that. If I click on the image and then go to Objects, Fill and Stroke, it'll open up this tab. Within this tab you've got three more tabs: Fill, Stroke Paint and Stroke Style. You can play around with these colours. You've got different colour systems here, and you can enter colour values here if you're making logos and that sort of thing, but we don't need particular colours for the purpose of this stencil tutorial. I want to get rid of the fill, so I'll click on the X. Then I'll click on the Stroke Paint tab to give it a stroke colour, and I just want to give it a flat colour here. You can also find gradients and that sort of thing here. I encourage you to play around. Then I'll click on Stroke Style. I want to use millimetres, so I'll change this value to millimetres, and then I want the width to be 0.1. And then I'll hit Enter, and I'll close down this tab. And now I'll go Control S, which is a shortcut for save, and it's good to get into the habit of doing that. Now at the moment we have several objects here which are all nested together to make this image. I want to separate them out, so I've got this selected, as you can see, and then I'll go to Path, Break Apart, and as you can see now each individual object has a selection box around it, and they're all individual. There's several things I want to do to improve this image. I want to make the antennae a bit straighter. I want to get rid of this little blob here. I want to separate out some of these objects so that the butterfly's veins show up better. I want to improve the layout of some of these blobs over here, and I want to smooth off the edges. To do that, I'm actually only going to edit one side, and I'll flip it over later on. So firstly, let's get rid of this blob. I'm just going to click on it with the Select tool that we've met before and hit delete on my keyboard, and I'm going to Control S again to save it. The next stage involves some drawing, so I'm going to introduce you to some of the drawing tools along the left hand side here. So to use the rectangle tool, click on it, and then you just click and drag to draw a square or a rectangle. Up here you have got in your tool property bar, you can change the width and the height, and you can also change the measurements. I'm not going to go through everything on the toolbars here. I'm just going to go through what's relevant for this tutorial. For the ellipse tool, you can click and drag, and again you can change the size here and the unit of measurement. For the star tool, you have options up here. You can choose polygon or star. You can draw a star and then change the number of spikes, and also how skinny or chunky a star is. You can go to the polygon tool, and again this is a way to draw triangles quickly. You get the idea. I'm going to skip these two and get rid of these. You can click and draw a rectangle or round shapes to select them all together, and then I'll delete those. So the pen tool here, this is the way that you will draw your points. So if you select the pen tool, you've got some different options up here. I again highly encourage you to play around with these because they're a lot of fun, but for now I'm going to use the regular Bezier path tool. So I'll click and then move to another point where I want the next node, and then click again. That's to do a straight line and a corner. And then if I want to draw a curve, instead of just clicking and then clicking again, I will click and drag before I let go, and you'll see this handle come out there. Click and drag, let go, click and drag, let go. And then to close a path, you just click on the first point. Let's delete that. Now we'll go to the pencil tool, which is a way to draw freehand. So I'm just going to click and hold while I move the cursor around to create my shape. And again, I can go back to the start and close that path. And let's delete that. And the final one I'm going to show you is a text tool. So you can pick your font here. You can make it, but that would be bold or regular if I had that option with this font. You can change the size. So let's click. Type some text into there. And if you have a look here again, let's go back to the text tool. Change the font. You can see what's going on here. Okay, so now we know how to do some basic drawing. I'm going to draw this little shape here to split these two apart. I'm going to use the pen tool. I'm going to click and just make a useful shape. And then close that off. So you see I've got another closed shape there. With that shape selected, I'm going to hold down Shift and then click on the shape that I want to split. That means I now have two selected. So remember to hold down Shift if you want to add to the selection. And now I'm going to go to Path, Division. You can now see I've got three selection boxes here. 1, 2, 3. Let's deselect those by clicking anywhere off them. And now let's click on the little shape I drew to get rid of it by hitting delete. So now we have a nice clean shape. Now we're going to look at how to tidy up an edge. So for this we're going to use a new tool we haven't looked at yet. This is the Edit Paths by Node tool. So click on that, and now I'm going to click on the edge. Now you'll see these little nodes come up that you saw earlier. If I hold the cursor over the node that I want to select, it'll turn red, and then I can click on it and it's selected, and you can see there's these two handles either side. So if I grab a handle, and I know that it's the right handle I wanted to get because it's turned red, I can change the form of this curve. Zoom out a little bit here. I can also, let's do the one next to it a little bit. I can also, if we zoom in here on this one that's a little bit spiky, that's because it's a different sort of node. It's not a Bezier curve node, it's a corner node. So if I click on it and then go up here, I've got an option to change that type of node. So I'm going to click on the smooth node, and you'll see now it's got its handles and it's smoothed off all on its own. I can improve that a little bit. If I want to delete a node to get rid of it completely, I'll just click on it to select it and then hit delete on the keyboard. I like to minimize the number of nodes that I have around a path. I just find it cleaner to work with, and if I need to do any editing later on, that's helpful then as well. I'll show you one more thing before I go ahead and edit this. If I zoom on an object here and click on it, you will see these little arrows that I talked about earlier. When these arrows are pointing out, I can grab them, click and hold, and drag to increase the size of the image. Now at the moment I'm just clicking and dragging with the mouse. If I hold down Control, then I can resize it with the ratio of height to width staying the same. If I click on it again, you'll see the arrows change and they point around the object. In this case I can click and drag to rotate the object. So now I'm going to go ahead and do the rest of those edits that I talked about. I've sped this up so I'm not really this quick. You don't have to be this quick either. I've just adjusted the antennae here and the head. I'll be flipping this over so I'm only editing one side. I'm clicking on the nodes and then either moving them over, you can see they're red when they're active, and then you can grab the handles either side and just use those to change the shape of the edge of your component. Now here you see a whole load of nodes. I'm clicking on them and deleting them. Click, hit delete, click, hit delete, and nothing seems to be happening. I think this might have happened when I divided the two images in step 10. It seems that what's happened is when it was divided, there's a whole load of it's either two shapes on top of each other or a whole load of points on top of each other, so I'm just keep on deleting until I get a couple of nodes left where I want them. I don't like loads of nodes around the edges of my shapes. I like clean edges. It makes them much easier to edit later on. So here I'm just changing the blobs, making them all a little bit better positioned. I'm changing corner nodes to curves to make it a bit smoother. As per step 11, if you're watching this as part of the blog tutorial, and if you're not watching this as part of the blog tutorial, I will put a link to the blog tutorial below as it has written instructions about this video. Whoa, what's going on with this one? That's a little bit random, isn't it? Look, I'm quite new to Inkscape. I'm used to using Adobe Illustrator, which has a slightly different set of commands, and it's just a new way of doing it for me. I'm relatively familiar with how to do things. I just have to sometimes tweak what I'm used to doing for Inkscape. Yeah, I get it wrong sometimes. No harm doing that when you're learning a new program. The more you get wrong, the more you learn. You have an undo button, don't stress out, just play with the program, keep going with it, and I promise you that you will pick it up so fast. I'm just going around refining everything here. Now I've edited this butterfly to my liking, I need to copy this side which I have edited over to the other side. Now at the moment the outline here is all one piece, so I need to split it in half in order to flip it over. To do that I'll make sure it's all ungrouped, which it is, and then I will go to my pen tool. I'll make a vertical line by clicking and then clicking again, holding down the control key at the same time. Now look at the difference. If I'm not holding the control key down, I can pick any angle. If I'm holding down the control key, I get increments. So I want a vertical line, so I'm going to click again and then hit enter, so I've got my line. Now what I'll do is I'll go to the selection tool. I've already got that line selected. I'll then click on the outline as well while holding down the shift key and then go path division. Now I've got two sides, so I'm going to click off to deselect and then click on the right hand side to select it and hit delete on my keypad. And now I'm going to click and drag a square around all those other elements and again delete it. So to copy and flip this over, I'm going to click and drag to select it all. To make it a bit easier to handle, I'm going to go to Object Group, so we're grouped again. And now I'm going to copy and paste it. There's several ways you can do this. You can go to Edit, Copy, and then Edit, Paste. Or as you'll see here, you can do Control C and Control V. So there's my duplicate copy. Now I want to flip this over. There's several ways to do that. You see up here on the Selection Tool Control panel, we've got some buttons here. This one is Flip Horizontally. If you go to the Object menu, you'll also find that option there. And you'll notice as well that the keypad shortcut is an H. So let's go ahead and hit H, and that is now flipped. I want to drag this over so that it matches up. It actually is a very good program for jumping to where you want it to be. Sometimes it can be too good, but if you ever have any problems positioning everything with the mouse, you can always use your arrow keys on the keypad like I'm doing now. But for now, that's in the correct position. I want now to merge the background, so I'm going to click on both of these groups, go to Object, Ungroup, then I'm going to deselect it by clicking on the artboard, and then I'm going to click, hold down Shift and click again on the two outlines, go to Path, Union, and there we now have our union. The reason we want to do that is we don't want to have a line down the middle. In fact, it would have been two lines because one was on top of the other. When the cutter tried to cut that, you would have ended up with a line down the middle of your stencil. Sometimes that doesn't really matter. It depends how you're laying out your stencil. It actually wouldn't have mattered for my purposes, but I prefer a clean image, as we all know by now. So now we have an image that's ready to go. I am going to Control S to save it again. So now this is a file that you can send to a cutter as it is, but there's a couple more things that I want to do to it. Depending on the size of the stencil and the panel that it's going on, I often will use the edges of my stencil to align it to the panel. My panel size is 120mm wide by 140mm high, so I'm going to go ahead and click on the rectangle tool, draw a rectangle, change the units to millimeters, and then I'm going to set the width by keying it in on my keypad. So there's my panel there. I want to send it behind this image because I want the butterfly to be on top so I can see it all together. So I can go to Object, Lower to Bottom. You can also raise to top or just raise it one layer depending on how many objects you've got on top of each other. Now I'll just draw a rectangle around the butterfly and go Object, Group, and I will drag that over. Using the little arrows that we saw before, I'm going to hold down the Control key and make that butterfly a bit bigger. I'm going to click again and rotate it. This butterfly is fairly centrally aligned on this panel, but if I wanted to make sure that it was perfectly central, I would go to Object, Align and Distribute, which brings up this tab. There's a few things you can do here. Obviously here you've got your left align, central align, right align, etc. I won't go into too much of this now, but there's a couple of ways I can do this here. I just grab all this and move it down under the page. The page is in the background here. You can set this up in Document Properties, which is here. There's all sorts of bits you can do here. Set your display units, set your page size, you can set it custom here, you can do portrait landscape. I won't go into that anymore now. But if I want to set this to the middle of this page, I will select both of these images, which are both selected at the moment, and make sure it's relative to page, and then click on the centrally aligned one. Just get rid of this little bit of gubbins here that I had from working out the tutorial earlier. And the other way is, I'll just drag this over to demonstrate the second way. So I'll just select those both, and you can go to, instead of page, you can use selection area, and the selection area is the area in which these two pieces are. because those are the pieces selected, and then again I'm going to click on center on vertical axis and also center on horizontal axis, so you can see that that butterfly is now perfectly aligned in the middle. And let's go Control S again to save the project, and we're done. I hope you found this tutorial interesting and that it's helpful for you with your projects at home. There's more information about this tutorial on the Sheet Moulding's website in the blog area. I'll put a link down below. I include materials that you can use to make stencils with, and also other ways in which you can use your SVG files that you create in Inkscape. Bye for now.